What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I am back with kind of a long overdue collection update. I've been amassing stacks of music and just haven't had a chance to really get to them in a while. We got a good mixed bag of stuff here, some newer releases that I didn't have a chance to go over and do like a full review on. There's multiple things that were sent to me here, some recommendations from commenters, and some stuff from the Metalhead box, because that's almost always in one of these. So let's just get into this, and we're going to open up with a pretty spicy one that was sent to me by a subscriber and fan of the channel, and I mean, there's really no getting around this one. We have Misanthropic Torment with their album Make Assassinations Great Again. Not an ounce of subtlety with this one. First off, I want to say sorry it took so long for me to get to this. Again, I've just been like backlogged with music here. And second, this is the 12th album from this Kentucky-based, well, at least as described in the Metal Archives Black and Death Metal, I think they were way off, or at least maybe at one point this band might have been like, 10 albums ago or something, but I would not call it that at all with this one. Now, as I said, this was sent to me by the frontman of this band, Eric Leviathan, who, if you want a really interesting read in terms of bios on the archives, go check that one out. Anyway, as you can tell, this is fiercely socio-political, and it even states on the album, this is for entertainment purposes only. And, well, yeah, I mean, this starts off with some stupid shit that Trump said at a certain point in time that really doesn't narrow it down at all. But then it gets into the music, and it kind of sounds like a combination of like Lamb of God and Ministry. The drums are definitely a drum machine. The guitar riffs, again, kind of like thrash and groove metal oriented. Maybe some occasional dissonant melodies to give it a little bit of atmosphere. I think that shows up on Deadly Aftermath. But yeah, that's kind of baseline what this is. I mean, it definitely does the Ministry thing where you have like a lot of samples peppered in. But, God, and I'm sorry because you sent this to me, and I feel bad that I'm going to kind of dog on this, but I'm really not like a big fan. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the subject matter. Like, I could give a shit. My feelings on, Trump and this current regime, I'm very transparent about it. But this lacks a lot of stuff that I would look for in terms of like music. Like, first off, the production is very uneven. It's very raw. The mix feels kind of off. The drum machine sound isn't the best. It does have like some good riffy songs every now and then, like Click Cage and America is a Fucking Disease. Can't necessarily argue with that at this point. But the songwriting on here is clunky and all over the place. You have odd transitions. There are occasionally like lead melodies that sound like the guitar is out of tune. And I have to say, and again, sorry, Eric, because I know you did the vocals on here, but I'm not a fan of the vocals. It sounds like they're almost always cupped, like, dude's cupping the microphone and just kind of growling into it, and it sounds very muffled and distorted. But the delivery, I feel like, is just, I don't know, kind of off. Like, there's a lot of like distortion on it. And in terms of the vocal cadences, I feel like they're just off, like perpetually. Like, they come in off the beat, and it's kind of like hard syncing them up with the riffs and, just music itself. And there are occasional cleans on here too, and I'm not a big fan of those either. While there were like occasional moments in songs that I really did dig, overall, like, most of the songs in here weren't very good. There's even a couple of covers, or at least one that I would say is kind of a tribute, Spirit Crusher, a tribute to death. I mean, it's definitely a tribute, it says so. I think that one's okay. It kind of feels a little more Toolish at points, but that actually features some really solid guitar work on it. And then they do a Korn cover for a Korn song that I can't say on here because it'll get me in trouble, but it begins with F, and it's on the first album, and that should kind of narrow it down. And it's not very good either. I'm sorry. I wish I had like nicer things to say because, again, Eric did send this to me, but I just really wasn't a fan. Still, if you're a fan of, again, like Lamb of God and Ministry, like those two in particular, check this out, give it a whirl. Who knows, you might dig it. This just wasn't for me though. Genocidal Rites, Genocidal Upheaval of Subservient Abrahamic Law. This is the debut album from this Toledo, Ohio-based black metal / war metal. Again, I'm still unsure as to what is war metal and what is not, because it seems like every time I say something is war metal, someone says, oh no, this isn't war metal. It's like, well, what the fuck is war metal then? Anyway, because Toledo is such a small city and everyone seems to know everyone here, I actually do know a member of this band. Former Wasteland Coven drummer Jason Wilcox is on here. I've known that dude for years. We tend to shop at the same record stores, and yeah, often we run into each other in the metal section. Imagine that. Anyway, I was looking forward to checking out this. I think I have a demo tape of theirs that I just completely forgot that I owned. Sorry, guys. But right from the rip, this starts off noisy and hellish, like loop noises and feedback and sizzle. There's probably car alarms and fucking air raid sirens going on in there too. It is just, well, I mean, like off-putting, but also still kind of like sets the atmosphere on here because this is just raw and vicious. Tons of blast beats. This is jagged and vicious. Lots of these like distant tremolos and agonized screams. The guitar tone in here is ridiculous. It sizzles, it crackles, it sounds like it's like legit deep frying the amps. Like this sounds like, you know, Titan Blood playing live in a machine shop while, you know, everyone's fucking working on the floor. A lot of this is a just flat out blistering pace across the board. You do get some like moments where they kind of slow it down a little bit, and honestly it kind of sounds like just hyper distorted grimy sludge metal. Let's see, Order of the Most Profane in particular has a nice like slow kind of lumbering breakdown, or at least a groovy section for a second before it takes off at like Mach 10 to catch up to, I don't know, Satan's coattails. You get a little bit of that same dynamic on the title track and Necrotic Hellhounds of an Atomic Future. These song titles are pretty fun, honestly. And there's even like a little spot of like what I would call death metal on Ceremonial Beheading of the Sons of Abraham. You know, they definitely got like a fierce theme here with just not liking any of the Abrahamic faiths, which, yeah, they're kind of hard to like these days. For the most part, the songs are short, they're violent, they are explosive as hell. It's kind of hard to pick up where they start and stop because this is just a constant battery. Like, you get like a split second in between the tracks before it inevitably just takes off again. But overall, I liked it. Like, this was just a punishing listen, but honestly, it was just kind of fun, and I just like the fact that this remained so intense throughout the entire listen. Like, this is kind of a no breaks run. I mean, unless you count like a groovy breakdown or a D-beat section as a break. I mean, I personally wouldn't. But yeah, the rest of it, just blasty and aggressive and just evil sounding as shit. And again, maybe it's war metal. I don't know. I suck at this game again. I'm pretty much the anime meme with the dude looking at the butterfly going, is this war metal? You know, I'm wrong more often than I'm right. Either way though, if you like, again, stuff like Titan Blood, Triumvir Foul, Pissgrave at some points too, I would say, check this out. Pretty nasty release. Schammasch Triangle. This is the third album from this Swiss blackened death metal act slash avant-garde black metal. I don't know. It's kind of hard to like pigeonhole this band, honestly, because they're so strange. And it's interesting calling this their third album because it's essentially 3 mini albums. Each one is about a half an hour long, and each one has their own title. The first one is The Process of Dying, the second one is Metaflesh, and the third one is The Supernal Clear Light of the Void. All of them sound pretty ominous, and all of them are really different. Now, I've become a big fan of this band, especially over the last 2 albums. I think both of those albums are absolutely brilliant pieces of work spanning a myriad of different styles. It's technical, it's atmospheric, it's progressive at times, and all of that is captured on here, but again, kind of like differently with each one, which I thought was pretty damn cool. Now, the first disc, The Process of Dying, is probably the most aggressive material of the 3. The songs just have a more aggressive death metal punch. There's a lot of stuff in there that reminds me of like Behemoth, maybe even Immolation at times. Really interesting transitions into like more atmospheric stuff, but it always kind of like circles back to these big, lumbering, droning, heavy riffs. The production across the board on all of this, I think, is absolutely fantastic too. Everything sounds big, bold, doesn't sound too overproduced. It actually sounds really crisp. And again, with the band's dense sound overall, especially on this first disc where they're playing stuff a little bit more aggressively and a little bit more like up-tempo, the production keeps it from sounding too muddy. But yeah, this first disc absolutely whoops ass. The songs are crushing. There's some absolutely killer tremolo harmonies on In Dialogue with Death, and Father's Breath in particular has this really awesome build that's kind of almost post-metal-ish, but it's definitely still more geared towards death metal. Love the vocals, they're sinister, they're dramatic. First disc, absolutely crushes. Then you get to the second disc, Metaflesh, which this is the more, I don't know, like meditative, more atmospheric side. Like the builds are a bit slower. There's a little bit more in the way of like clean vocals. In fact, I'd say most of the vocals are clean. The song Satori in particular has Gregorian chants, and it kind of gives it this big, ominous, just kind of creepy apocalyptic sound. You do have like sections with blast beats, but it's not like done in a super intense way. It's almost, again, like more like meditative. Like this is just about like the atmosphere and the melody and kind of being more haunting and sinister rather than being like brutal and in your face. And honestly, it really works. It's just as captivating as the first disc, but for a totally different reason. And then you have the third disc, the Supernal Clear Light of the Void. And honestly, this is the only one that I wasn't a fan of because it's all instrumental ambient stuff, and it just doesn't go anywhere. Like it's just steady droning and atmosphere. Like there's some big swells of, riffs and synths. I don't know. I found it to be pretty damn tedious. Like it felt like it took a long time trying to get where it was going, and I'm not sure where it was going, but I didn't follow it. But 2 out of 3 isn't bad, and that's still an hour's worth of music on here that I thought was really fantastic. So yeah, in terms of the first 2 discs, I totally recommend them. Check this album out, it's fantastic. I suppose if you're looking for some haunting background atmosphere, the third disc is pretty good for that, but in terms of like something I would sit back and listen to all the time, not really. But yeah, this was a solid album. If you're a big fan of, again, like, Behemoth, Neurosis, Immolation. There are points in here it kind of sounds like early Gojira too, maybe a bit of Morbid Angel. Check this album out, absolutely killer stuff, maybe minus that last disc, which, I mean, who knows, that might be your thing too. It just really wasn't mine. But yeah, check this out. Seth Les Blessures del Lam. I'm so sorry to all French-speaking nations. This is the first album from this French black metal act. I've been meaning to check them out for a while. I heard a lot of good things about the last album. People were putting it on year-end lists, and I saw this in the used band. I was like, that's that French band that I need to check out. And then I looked at the back and noticed that every single song on here is in French. So aboard the struggle bus we go. Now, while the song titles are going to be impossible for me to say, which I might just cheat and say track 1 or track 2, the music is pretty damn awesome. It's still raw and very crisp and very gainy, but this is more I wouldn't call it symphonic black metal, but it's definitely synth heavy. This kind of reminds me a lot of early Dimmu. The synths are prominent. They add a lot to the atmosphere. It kind of gives it that creepy, Transylvanian medieval sort of vibe. But this is very melody centric. In fact, every single song on here had great melodic hooks, whether it was in sections where they would just break it down and throw in a really nice lead melody, or the constant melodic tremolo harmonies on here, which it's every song. Every single song has them. The vocals definitely have that old school kind of black metal croak, but there's a lot of spoken word in between there too. And lots of beautiful, shimmering, clean melodies on, we'll just say, tracks 3, 4, and 5. I'm sorry, I can't. That's just gonna be so fucking awkward trying to say all that shit. There's definitely a bit of a second wave appeal to some of these songs, but there's more intricacy to it. There's a lot more dynamic, kind of comparable to Dissection in a way. You get this frequent shift between dark and sinister melodies to these very lush, very pretty, kind of folk tinged melodies all over here. Track 6, which I only recognize the word serpent in there. Beautiful instrumental, haunting, very catchy, great builds to it, lots of ascending melodies and descending melodies. And the last track as well, I think, is probably my personal favorite on here. It's just an absolutely grand, majestic track with beautiful hooks across the board, great songwriting. I really dig this. I do think that some of the songs are a little bit drawn out. There are points where it kind of does drag a little bit. And while I appreciate the more raw production here, I do think I want to check out some of their more recent offerings just to hear if they've kind of modernized it a bit, because I feel like there are elements in here that kind of get lost in the mix. But overall, I think this is a solid album. I definitely want to get more Seth in the future. If you're a big fan of, you know, early Dimmerborger specifically, again, a little bit of dissection, Satyricon, stuff like that, check this album out. Really good stuff. I don't do drugs, I am drugs. This is the first full length from this Scottish progressive death metal act. Second release overall. I went over their first EP, The Savant on Ketamine, which is a hell of a title and a hell of a really strange progressive death metal EP. Much like the last one, this was sent to me by our buddy Scott Hogue out of Scotland. He is one of the main guys behind the band Cyclops Cataract, and this is one of his side projects. And he was once again kind enough to send me an album, and this is an improvement over the EP. I like the EP. I thought it was strange. It's weird. I know that Scott is a big fan of Devin Townsend. We have bonded over social media over how amazing Debbie is and just in general. And once again, you can definitely hear that, though. This has elements of, like, you know, more like technical avant-garde material too. Right away with the opening track, Dretch, I don't know how to say that word. You already get that big lush atmosphere that Debbie is known for, and I like how it kind of builds into this like heavier, darker, more sinister sound. And this kind of goes across like a lot of like Debbie's different sounds, and I really like that. Like, this doesn't just sound like Devin Townsend project or like a solo stuff. There are elements of like Strapping Young Lad on here, some stuff that I would compare to like even bands like Nemec and Fear Factory in terms of like heavy syncopated chugs and really just blistering drum work. Huge sweeping dynamics where it goes from like lush and beautiful to something just absolutely feral in like a split second. And it's pretty much kind of everything that they were doing on the EP, though I think they did it better in here. First off, I think the production overall is better. There's still like some like dynamic range issues between tracks. Like, some tracks do sound a little bit like quieter or more muffled than others. Sometimes the levels on the drums also change. Sometimes they do feel like a little bit thin. The guitars in here are huge, powerful as hell, big, thick, meaty tone, but they also know how to like kind of walk it back and give you some great clean tones as well. Vocals, I think, are like a big improvement on here. There's a better like dynamic between the harsh and clean vocals on here. And rhythmically, I think this one's like a little bit more creative and just like a little bit more fun too. Like, you get good blast beat sections and songs like Pulsing Larva, Biome of Decay, and Myxomatosis. Maybe that's how you say that? And again, the wild transitions on here. There are moments where like it's just like stop on a dime going from one style to the next. And sometimes that's like even on like a chorus part too. Like Biome of Decay, the start of the chorus is absolutely savage as hell. Like almost brutal death metal for a second. And then it just takes this big old U-turn to like a big catchy kind of like almost epic chorus. You get big atmospheric swells at times that definitely kind of transport you to a very interesting setting. Like Murmuration, the last track, there's a lot of like, you know, nature sounds and birds and babbling brooks and such. And despite this album being just all over the place, it really does kind of like transport you to like just sort of a place of calm for a moment before, you know, you get back into the heavier stuff. Myxomatosis, or however you say that, is also a big standout for me. I like the weird syncopation with this like marching snare sort of like breakdown rhythm on it. It definitely has like some like big aggressive bite to it. This whole album is a wild journey, or maybe like a psychedelic fever dream at times, but I think this shows like an improvement from the first one in terms of like the songwriting and the dynamics, because these songs stuck with me a little bit more than they did with the EP songs. I mean, hell, they even squeezed in a ballad on here with Coniferous, which is honestly just really catchy, really pleasant and soothing. And there's definitely moments of that, of course, but this album is just kind of all over the place in terms of like its emotional spectrum. Yeah, I dig this. This is a really solid follow-up to the EP. I think there's some like ideas that get a chance to get explored a little bit more because this is a less condensed form. And overall, I hear a lot of musical growth in here. If you're a big fan of, oh man, dude, like BT Bam, Devin Townsend, I mean, kind of pick a Devin Townsend thing, and there's definitely elements on there. Nemec, maybe Rivers and Isle too. Give this one a whirl. This is pretty solid. Cave In, Jupiter, the 25th anniversary remaster. Second album from, well, at least before this, metalcore act turned post-rock act. This is honestly one of my favorite albums by the band. And yeah, I already own it, and I will argue maybe it didn't necessarily need a remaster. I like the production on the original, but here I am with another copy of it because I love this album so much. And honestly, the remaster sounds good too. But I lost the case to my copy of Jupiter forever ago, and I feel kind of better having a copy now with a case. And of course, a really cool slipcover, which that's really nice. But yeah, I got those first two albums at the same time, and believe me, when I listened to both of them, I thought I was listening to two completely different bands. This one foregoes all of the screaming pretty much that was on the first one, Until Your Heart Stops, which is an absolute banger of an album. The only scream that's on here is on Big Riff, which does deliver on the song title, but this is where Stephen Brodsky wanted to explore more atmospheric music. He also was kind of, I believe, afraid of like ruining his voice, screaming his guts out, and, you know, honestly kind of made a wise move here. Anyway, this was a pretty big landmark album for this band, and I would consider their first album a landmark album as well, because it's, I think, one of the best metalcore albums that came out of the whole Massachusetts metalcore scene back in like the, you know, late 90s, early 2000s. But this showed off a whole other realm of musicality. Beautiful songwriting on here. I love pretty much every track in here. I have to actually go back and look at them though. Innuendo and Out the Other, clever song title, but also just beautiful, catchy song. The last two tracks in particular, Decay of the Delay and New Moon, two of my favorites. I love the fact that they still found a way to be heavy, but they kind of brought in all these like shimmering, bright, chimey melodies. And that kind of became a signature thing with this band overall. Like, they never lost any element of like this album, I would say, throughout their entire career. Occasionally you would hear stuff that's, you know, like a little bit more on the heavier side that is a little more akin to, you know, Until Your Heart Stops. But this album, this became kind of like the blueprint for kind of everything going forward. But yeah, technically I didn't need this, but again, it's nice to have, you know, a version with a case now instead of like just a thin jewel case holding a beat up CD that I've played a ton. And as an added bonus, there is an entire live set in here with the second disc on here. So it's not just the remaster, you do get some extras. But yeah, I mean, if you're a longtime Cave In fan and I don't know, you just want a fresh copy of the album, I strongly recommend it. It sounds beautiful. The live set sounds really cool. And in terms of like getting into Cave In as a whole, I would recommend this album maybe more than Until Your Heart Stops, because that album is kind of on a bit of a musical island when it comes down to this band's entire discography. But overall, I would say just check out Cave In general. One of my favorite bands in terms of like, God, I don't even know what the hell they are. They're kind of just Cave In. It's become like kind of a mix of so many different things, you know, post-rock, you know, occasionally shoegaze, hardcore, metalcore, mathcore, sludge metal, stoner metal. They've kind of incorporated it all over the years, and they've done it so damn well. But yeah, strongly recommend this album, and then again, explore the rest of their discography because it's pretty much all awesome in my opinion. Hindward, I think that's how you pronounce it. Demiurgic Forces. This is the debut album from this one-man depressive atmospheric black metal act out of Canada. I got this one in the Metalhead box a while ago, and admittedly when I saw it was depressive black metal, I was like, that's kind of like hit or miss with me. Like, some bands within that cell I really dig, like None. I think Damn Chill of Life is an amazing album that I can't listen to very often, otherwise I will spiral into a endless cycle of depression. But others I just can't get into it because they just kind of ham up the depression a little bit, especially when they start crying on albums. I hate when the vocals just shift from like something agonized and desperate to like, dude, you're just fucking crying. That almost feels like a cheat. Anyway, this was honestly pretty decent. Lots of like, you know, cold but very damp melodies. Like, this doesn't sound like raw and gainy. It has a more, I wouldn't necessarily call it lush, but it feels damp and like misty overall. The vocals in particular are very harrowing. I don't know if there are actual lyrics. I mean, I looked in the liner notes. It's just more artwork and the songs listed, but I can't really make out individual words, and it doesn't even sound like he's trying to say words. They sound like just these agonized, desperate screams, which are pretty effective. They contribute heavily to the atmosphere, and I feel like they kind of like move around on the album a little bit, kind of just surrounding you and weeping ghoulish ghosts and such. You do get like some good haunting synths every now and then. They don't overdo those. Lots and lots of dissonant melodies, really good tremolo harmonies. Like it kind of chalks off like kind of everything you need for like pretty solid black metal in my opinion. But this is depressive black metal, so that means you have to soak the entire mix in like the tears of 1,000 children or some shit. But they do it effectively. You have songs that are a little bit more groove laden with like more doomy, forlorn, groovy sections, so the atmosphere opens up and it kind of gets away from the heavy tremolos, which of course there are tons of heavy tremolos and blast beats, long droning sections. A lot of these songs are pretty damn long too. I want to say, a lot of them are at the 10-minute mark or maybe beyond. I will say that the last 2 tracks did kind of drag on a little bit and they kind of get lost in all the ambience and such. There's some really unnerving like synths and like dissonant guitar riffs on the last track in particular that kind of just make it sound very noisy and like extra cavernous. At points I would say kind of like leaves the depressive realm and just kind of gets flat out more sinister. But overall I thought this was pretty decent. Not entirely my thing. Again, at certain points it just kind of dragged and it was kind of losing me, but overall, like the atmosphere was really well done. I thought the production was pretty solid, nice and layered and just dense with misery. If you're a big fan of, None, but I think None definitely is a more dynamic band overall. I would just say like just gloomy black metal in general. I don't listen to a lot of depressive black metal, so I don't have a lot of like big comparisons on there. But if you like your black metal like just extra sad, then 100% check this out. Holy Death, Paradise, and that's one word, and it's D-I-C-E, which they were kind enough to actually send some dice in the package when I ordered this. Now this is the second album from this, at least then Nevada, now California based Death Doom act. At least it had it listed as Death Doom in the archives. I think there's a hefty dose of metallic hardcore in here too. This was recommended by a subscriber that has been around for a while and comments rather frequently, occasionally a little cantankerous, but he recommended this one to me and I forget which review it was, and I checked it out and was like, holy shit, it was just instantly awesome. And yeah, when I saw the CD in the back, it actually said no weak riffs. All right, that's pretty bold, but it is accurate. This thing is a chuggy monster. This thing is just built on hefty syncopated grooves. The production here is just gross. It is so damn heavy. The snare sounds like gunfire echoing in a fucking canyon. The guitars have this almost HM2 sludgy sort of snarl to them. The vocals, deep kind of death metal bellows, but a lot of like hardcore inflection to them. It's menacing. It is out to fucking fight. I'm actually kind of surprised that on the archives this wasn't listed with like a little bit of metallic hardcore, because even when it comes down to like the setups for breakdowns, you get that classic like isolation vocalist fucking says some shit to fucking get everyone riled up, and then it just comes in with these disgusting breakdowns. And man, that's like every fucking track in here. Like the opening track, Plague Saint, Tire Iron, which that song sounds like the soundtrack to someone getting a tire iron to the kneecaps. You get some cool metallic guitar harmonies every now and then for just a smidge of metal, but this thing is just all about, the beat down energy. Idea of Evil in particular stood out to me for the giant tremolos, like they're just deep and gnarly and sizzly. And the bass tone is also fucking just gross as hell on here too. But it also peppers in some blast beats, which this is not a particularly blasty album. Like for the most part, as fast as it gets is a D beat, but most of the time it is just heavy, chunky grooves and just shit to inspire the most violent of mosh pits. I didn't really get a lot of like doom on here outside of maybe the last track, Kali Yuga Blues, which slows it down about a half step. You get a little bit more of those like big, heavy droning riffs, like, because a lot of this, like the riff work is just chug city. Like think of like early Gate Creeper, the Acacia Strain, You know, stuff that is just built on just, you know, beat down energy. But hearing him switch gears a little bit and kind of letting a little bit more of the doom kind of come to the surface was kind of cool, and definitely was a good, just gnarly closer to this beast. Yeah, I pretty much loved everything about this. Like, every single track in here was awesome. And they are right, there are no weak riffs in here. Not a single fucking one. This is an absolute beast. If you're a big fan of, again, like just violent metallic hardcore with, you know, maybe like a little bit of a doomy tinge, like it is more mid-tempo to slow for the most part. I don't know, if you just like stuff like Acacia Strain, Gate Creeper, Creeping Death, and yeah, man, there's a lot of bands I could fucking compare, but I can't seem to think of them right now. Yeah, if you just like pure beatdown energy and you're fucking, you know, death metal / metallic hardcore / a little bit of doom, this right here, absolutely awesome album. Earth Crisis, Firestorm. This is the second EP from these Syracuse metalcore legends, metallic hardcore legends, whatever the hell you want to call them. I've been an Earth Crisis fan for years, and this EP has eluded me for years. And luckily, I had not spent all of my gift cards from Amazon over Christmas, and I finally managed to snag this thing. It was definitely a little pricey, and this is the German version of the EP, but I will take what I could get, because trying to find an OG version, like an OG US version, I'd probably be spending even more money. Well, the All Out War EP definitely got them started. I thought it was a little rough around the edges, but this is the one that kind of like propped them up. Like, everyone kind of latched on this. This really kind of put like Victory Records on the map too. This became like a landmark release for metallic hardcore, and it's because it has all the elements that we're still using today. Big chuggy riffs with like good metallic inflections and like harmonies and such, but a lot of that just massive hardcore energy, big grooves. The songs were notably more dynamic than they were on All Out War. All Out War, again, you know, it's rough around the edges. It's still fun. This felt focused. This felt driven. Carl sounded way more vicious on here. He still had that like very youthful, like kind of punky sound, but he was getting grittier and darker. I think the lyrical themes were a little bit more thought out too. And this one just packed a ton of just killer riffs for such a short offering. Unseen Holocaust, one of my favorite tracks on here. I love the machine gun riff over that kind of like slower groove. That's been a favorite trope of mine and like, well, metal in general for years. The halftime groove that shows up on Eden's Demise as well, with that like fun syncopated chug, that like hardcore bounce. Love that. I love this whole EP, and honestly, I feel like it only got better with Destroy the Machines, which, I mean, that's still probably my favorite Earth Crisis release. Spoiler alert, if we ever rank Earth Crisis. But yeah, I think outside of that covers collection, the one that came out after Slither, this is almost it for me as far as like Earth Crisis releases, unless they decide to release something new, which I'm all for it. But yeah, this was an awesome find. Again, paid maybe a little bit more than I initially wanted to, but again, it was gift card money, so I'm treating myself. I feel like I deserve this. Kinda, maybe, I don't know. I fucking love the shit out of it. That's kind of the main thing here. But yeah, if you've never jammed Earth Crisis, honestly, this is not a bad place to start. Like, you know, Destroy the Machines is generally the one I'm going to recommend, but if you wanted a smaller dose in terms of just Earth Crisis putting out some of their best work, Firestorm EP. Check it out. Fucking awesome shit right here. Red Fang, Deep Cuts. This is a 2-disc compilation of just, well, B-sides and rarities from this Oregon-based stoner metal act. I've been a fan of this band since Murder Their Mountains. Honestly, they make the best music videos possibly ever. They're hilarious. They're weird. If you don't believe me, check out the video for Wires. It's one of the best music videos ever fucking done. But yeah, this is pretty much just odds and ends from stuff they've released on like EPs or singles. Honestly, there's a fair amount of stuff in here that I already had, but you know, there's some really fun like odds and ends and like stuff they did during COVID when they were just kind of, you know, well, doing what everyone else did, trying to make the best of the downtime. And these guys wrote some like weird riffy jams with like weird synths. I don't know, like this band's songwriting, even in terms of like stoner metal, is just kind of odd. There's a lot of Melvin's worship in there. Definitely like, you know, sludge metal, of course, like kind of working its way in. Anyway, stuff from like their Scion EP back when like Scion was doing that. some Adult Swim stuff. A fair amount of covers here too from bands like Wipers, Two Way Army, No Talent, Dust, which is like a pre-Ramones thing for one of the Ramones. But surprisingly, not a single Melvins cover. I was kind of hoping there would be a Melvins cover. There's even a song in here called Ice Ice Baby, and well, it's not a cover of Ice Ice Baby. I was a little disappointed there too. There's also like some weird experimental stuff in here that I thought was kind of interesting. But yeah, for a collection of odds and ends, a lot of this is pretty damn fun. And it's just good having like a physical copy with some of the songs that I was missing, like, you know, the Adult Swim song. I can't remember which one it was. Might have been Hollow Light. I don't know. I can't remember. But it's nice having like that on an actual CD too. And overall, this was just a very entertaining, weird listen. And apparently I need to check out some of the stuff by some of the bands that I covered that I don't have because, I don't know, it sounded pretty damn interesting. But yeah, if you're a big Red Fang fan, honestly, this is a pretty good pickup. I wouldn't say this is for fans only. Like, this has some legit, weird, deep cuts on here, and the covers are a lot of fun too. And if you've never heard Red Fang, honestly start with Murder in the Mountains. That's such an awesome album. The original EP is also a banger. Prehistoric Dog is like one of their best fucking songs. Pretty much just jam more Red Fang. Jam Red Fang, they're fun, they're weird, they're catchy, and again, best music videos possibly ever. Check them out. Sculpture, Landkrieg. This is the fourth album from this German death metal act. I have been going over this band since the very early years of this channel. Back when we were still doing like the Screaming Toilet thing, for those who've been with us for, well, 6 years. I covered their second album, Eisenzeit, which was an absolute banger, and I've become like a big fan of this band, and I've been very eager to go over this one because this is just an absolutely crushing old school death metal bruiser. This band is definitely very rooted in, you know, I would say like bands like Asphyx, Bullthrower, a lot of like double time groove, big on the riffs. The riffs are plentiful. They come at you often, and they come at you heavier than fuck. And much like Asphyx and Bullthrower, a lot of this is themed around war. Despite how pleasant this album cover looks, the themes are grisly. It's about like, you know, being down in the trenches, in the shit, fighting for your fucking life. And they capture it so well. I will say that they kind of like dialed back a little bit of the atmosphere from the last album, which we reviewed, which was also damn good. But this one just goes to the throat with riffs. And I would say like there's a little bit more like breakdown energy in here. Like there's some moments in here that almost have like a metallic hardcore bite occasionally. Forgive me, some of these songs are actually in German, but I believe it's the third track, Till Ferret Undergang. There's actual like hardcore gang vocals. They kind of make them like sound a little bit more death metal, but it packs like a nasty punch with like the big syncopated chuggy grooves that show up. While a lot of this is more groove laden, there's definitely some more up-tempo moments, even some thrashy moments on Den Morka Nattens Legion, maybe? And the song Land Sknecht. I'm sorry. I fucked up 2 languages in this one so far. I can't remember if there's anything else in like, you know, a different language in this stack, but trust me, when it comes down, the pronunciation is bound to be fucking terrible. The production here, I think, is really crisp. There's like a little bit of like a cavernous vibe to the vocals, but it's not like too overdone. It's still fiercely old school, but it does have like some more modern touches. But I mean, overall, the big thing on here are the riffs and the dynamics. I think the songs are written well. They're emotional. They are often very dark and sinister. And when they're not just dark and sinister and moody, they are just flat out heavier than fuck. Pretty much, again, if you like Bullthrower and Asphyx, I would even say like a little bit of Bloodbath. And then some of the doomier moments, like, you know, like maybe like a bit of like early Paradise Lost as well. Just a lot of really good things. I love this album pretty much front to back. I think there's like the right amount of atmosphere in here. It doesn't really kind of like overdo anything, and it doesn't underdo anything. It's just solid, bone-crushing, old school death metal. And I'm always down for that. Yeah. Check this album out, and if you dig it, check out their other albums. I don't think this band has released a bad album yet. Hell of a 4-album run so far. But yeah, check this out. It's an absolute beast. Guts, Nightmare Fuel. This is the second album from this Finnish death metal act. I covered their last album, Decay, in a collection update. I dug it. You know, it was a good old school debut. It sounded fiercely 90s. And for a Finnish death metal band, this honestly has like a lot of US death metal tropes, and once again, that continues. And I heard a ton of hype about this one, even in comparison to the last one being a little bit better. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, kind of, I feel like it's kind of about the same thing. This band is fiercely old school. They have a very meat and potato sound. It's riff and groove, and maybe like a little bit of death and roll this time. Like there's a lot of like riffs in here, I would say, that are like kind of like hard rockish at points. Like it's like a little bit of like, Obituary on their lighter, more fun side, like, Redneck Stomp, and, maybe a little bit of like Wolverine Blues, and maybe a little bit of 6 Feet Under, except, better. It's just very on the nose, like old school kind of fun death metal. Like, it sticks to the grooves. There's not a lot of like big riff changes. I wouldn't call this like technical in the least. It's just straightforward, very catchy. I will say, like, production wise, it feels a little bit odd because the bass on here is really loud, and at times it kind of makes the guitar sound a bit thin. I feel like the mix might have been like a little bit better on the first album. The vocals in here, I think, are awesome. They are just, again, flat out old school death metal vocals. I don't really know how else to like describe them, but there's like a weird vibe to this album. Like, it's kind of fun. It's kind of upbeat. Like the song Ravenous Leech, there's like a funky bass lead into it, and honestly, the riffs kind of sound, I don't want to say happy, but I don't know, glad to be in such a fun song. And this is one of those songs where I'd say that kind of like death and roll vibe is very much there. Same thing on BNST and Echoes of Desolation. They just have like, I don't know, like more rock riffs to them. And honestly, there are points in here where I feel like you could totally convert like a diehard Lamb of God fan to this band because it's so groove laden and just kind of on the nose with the riffs. That isn't a dig against this band at all. I still like early Lamb of God. And if this band hates Lamb of God or hates that comparison, I'm sorry, but it kind of feels appropriate because this is very hook laden, very catchy, and I don't know, like, it's different. Like, I look at the album cover, I look at the logo, I expect something way swampier and gross, like, well, almost every Finnish death metal album ever. But this just kind of has like a fun boogie and a fun swagger to it. Like, this is just flat out fun death metal. But yeah, if you like, Jungle Rot and Obituary, and again, like 6 Feet Under without Barnes fucking croaking over every song, check this out. This is pretty damn good. And check out the debut too. I think it's also pretty good. I might favor the debut a little bit more, but they're both pretty damn good. All right, we got a split here between Wormwitch and Sadistic Ritual that came out last year that I totally gonna just let fly under the radar, which sucks because I love Sadistic Ritual in particular. Wormwitch is awesome too. And if I had known, maybe this might have ended up on my year-end list for EPs and splits. Now, Wormwitch is a black metal / crust band from Vancouver. I've been a fan of that band for, God, I want to say since their debut album, might have been their second album. But I know with their last album, they definitely went more full bore towards black metal. Like a lot of the crust elements kind of like dropped out. Like they still showed up occasionally, but not nearly as much. This one is kind of a balance of that. The 3 songs in here are a good balance of like just flat out black metal, snarling, evil, kind of grimy sounding. Really solid production, though I do think the vocals sit a little too far back in the mix. Love the tremolo harmonies on Weapons Against Despair and Spells of Tartarus. Very catchy, very cold and grimy. Reanimate Banners is probably my favorite in terms of their side, though. That's got the more crust vibe, like it sounds like a fucking Dysphere song, and I'm a sucker for anything that sounds like Dysphere or any of the number of disc bands that worship Discharge. But yeah, their side was awesome, but Sadistic Ritual, that's the one I was really stoked for, and all 3 of their tracks are absolutely awesome. This band is just riffy as hell, a good blend of thrash metal, black metal, and death metal, and they just do it so fucking well. Their last album was a year-ender for me for a reason, and I still jam the shit out of that one. Obscurity Stare comes out with just an absolutely killer riff, and I love how they mix up the riffs and the atmosphere in here. You get the snarling black metal vocals and atmosphere, but the riffs are just like almost like pure death thrash. They're just violent, chuggy, not always super fast. In fact, I think the Reskin is probably the only one that's like a little bit more high octane, like just blasty and shit. And Reminiscence Unrealized has some really cool like classic heavy metal melodies in it. Both sides of the split absolutely whooped ass. And it's kind of cool hearing bands that are, you know, kind of similar. Like you can kind of hear where their styles overlap a little bit, but they still are, you know, very different from one another. And yeah, this whole EP crushes, and I really wish I went over it last year because it probably would have been on my EP list. But yeah, if you're a big fan of either one of these bands, honestly, and you know, got Aura Noir and Dysphere and like the Death Crush EP from Mayhem. I don't know, like there's a lot of different things going on here, but trust me, check this out. Both sides whoop ass. Christian Mistress, Children of the Earth. This is the fourth album from this Washington/Oregon heavy metal act. I was a big fan of their first three albums, and then they ended up breaking up in 2016, reformed in 2022, I believe. And I had actually planned on doing a full-on review of this one, but again, there were just so many damn releases, and you know, this one kind of fell by the wayside, but I still picked it up. And this is pretty good. I will say I kind of like the first three a little bit better, namely because I feel like in their earlier material there was a little bit of doom metal kind of woven in, and I really like that. Like this does, you know, all the cool things that I expect from like, you know, classic heavy metal, lots of guitar harmonies and such, galloping rhythms. It's triumphant, it's catchy. The vocals, once again, I think Christine Davis does a solid job singing. She has a good kind of like gruff singing voice. Like there's just like a little bit of grit to it that I absolutely love. But this album I feel is more just straight up classic heavy metal. A lot of the doomy, darker, more like sinister, you know, kind of melodies and such have kind of been pushed the wayside for, you know, something that is, again, like more akin to like just classic heavy metal, like, you know, Iron Maiden, Angel Witch, you know, take your pick. And kind of like a little bit of like classic 70s rock, like slash like proto metal, like bands like Budgie and Thin Lizzy. The first three tracks in here, City of Gold, Voiceless, and Demon's Night, are all very like up-tempo, lots of galloped rhythms, great guitar harmonies on Voiceless in particular. The guitar harmonies across the board in this album, it just has that classic sound, like the stuff that I look for in like old school Judas Priest and even like, you know, classic Thin Lizzy stuff. The riffs are catchy and infectious. Occasionally you get like a, you know, classic kind of bar rock blues sort of swagger to it, like Love of the World kind of has like just a little bit of that, but of course like mixed in with like some classic heavy metal tropes too. Mythmaker and Lake of Memory are two of my big standouts, as they're like a little bit slower. They kind of get down to like a good mid-tempo sort of vibe, good chuggy riffs on Mythmaker, and I love the vocal harmonies in that one. And then on Lake of Memory, the riffs just flat out win out, like some of the catchiest riffs on the entire album. Now, I enjoyed this album, but again, you know, comparing it to the previous three, I don't think it's quite as strong. There are some transitions that I felt like were a little off, like Demon's Night, while I think it's a solid song, there's a break in there where he gets into like a lead at the end of the song, and it feels like the start of a completely different song. And at times, I will admit that I feel like this is maybe a little too stripped down, a little too bare bones at times. And I really do miss like the doom-laden melodies that were on some of their earlier albums too. It kind of added like a little bit more to the mixture than just straight up like classic heavy metal. But in terms of like just classic straight up heavy metal, this is pretty damn good. Solid riffs, solid vocals, great guitar harmonies. Like it kind of checks off, you know, most of the boxes that I look for in like classic heavy metal. And while I do prefer like the earlier stuff, I would say this is still really good. If you're a big fan of, you know, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, like classic Scorpions too, again, like the proto metal stuff, like Budgie and Thin Lizzy really stood out to me as well. Check this out. Pretty solid return for this band, and looking forward to hearing more from them in the future now that they're back. Costic, Flem, Purilint Apocalypse. This is the debut album from this one-man Scottish death metal act. I had been hearing a lot of buzz about this one, especially from some YouTubers across the pond. And in terms of just like flat out rotten, filthy, disgusting, swampy death metal, this is up there with some of like the filthiest shit I think I've heard this year. This is absolutely rotten and has some fun retro notes. Like this sounds entirely analog. In fact, you can hear like an analog hiss in the background that honestly starts to turn into like a bit more of like a hum, like, you know, you're watching a fucking really, really old VHS copy of like your favorite horror movie, and you can kind of hear that kind of crackle, you know, in between like the horror synth moments. The production is muddy and filthy. The vocals are about as inhuman and as disgusting as possible. It sounds like someone like just vomiting directly on the fucking microphone. I'll be honest, it's kind of almost like Pissgrave-ish, but like not as like violently fast and like hyper distorted across the board. Like the production here is just pure murk. And I'll even say that the drums kind of they're on that threshold of annoyance with the snare. Like it's kind of close, but I got through it. And honestly, this album just kind of has this grimy, filthy sort of, I don't know, like horror movie sleaze that I kind of dig. Like if this were the 90s and this was like a video rental place, this would be a direct-to-video fucking gorehound flick that they keep in like the back of the fucking store. Like, oh, you want like the real shit? Come on back here. Like they kept it like more under lock and key than they did the adult films. But it's a little bit like just good old school charm. Like, you know, Impose to Decompose and the title track both have like these fun, gnarly two-steps, swampy ass riffs. There's some thrashier sections on here and songs like Fouled, Infested, and Infected, and Flesh Melt Contagion. These all sound like horror movies that I rented back in the 90s, honestly. And all this is kind of wrapped in this slimy, just festering atmosphere in here that is just rotten. Again, like, back to the vocals. As the album goes on, I feel like the vocals get more wet. Like, they sound like they mic'd the bucket the dude was puking his guts up in. There's like gurgles and snorts, and I don't know, there might have been a fucking like wet splash in there someplace amongst all the just rotten crackling and griminess in here. But honestly, it's really fun, and it's just super over the top. Like, I even think the song Soft Bones, there's a melody in there that I swear sounds like part of the score to Beetlejuice. Might be, I don't know. I feel like this album should be just dripping some sort of green liquid as I hold it right now. It's that fucking gross. If you're a big fan of, I mean, Autopsy is probably one of the big ones I could think of. Maybe a little bit of Broken Hope. Pissgrave, kinda in a way in terms of like how distorted it is, but musically I feel like this is just a little bit more loose and less disgusting. Doesn't take much to be less disgusting than Pissgrave though. But yeah, check this out. Pretty gnarly stuff. As the World Dies, Nebula. This is the second album from this UK-based progressive death metal act. Features Scott Fairfax of Memoriam, who was kind enough to actually send me a copy of this album. Thank you once again. And again, like to anyone that sent me an album here recently, sorry it took me so long to get to it. But Scott hit us up after we reviewed the last Memoriam album. He really appreciated all the kind things we said, and he sent us a care package with this album in it. And this is pretty interesting. Like, it's really kind of hard to describe. Like calling it just progressive death metal, I mean, it feels like it has a lot of elements, both of like just flat out old school chuggy death metal and a lot of like modern death metal flair. There are synths, and they do have like a sci-fi-ish sort of, you know, vibe to them when they do show up, but they're not, you know, all over the place. This is very riff-driven and very heavy. If I remember right, when we reviewed the last Memoriam, Scott mentioned that he was a big fan of Melodeath, and the Melodeath riffs that kind of showed up in the album were definitely his touches. And they show up here too, but man, I was kind of expecting something like a little bit like, you know, more, I don't know, like balanced as far as like melody and brutality, but for the most part, I was kind of surprised that this is just flat out heavier than hell. The production here, while it's very modern, very crisp, a lot of the riffs in here just have like a good classic death metal flair. And I would say are kind of like comparable to like, you know, newer death metal bands that kind of have like an old school sound, like Mutagenic Host in particular, and the band Nothingness out of Minnesota. Vocally, there's a lot of dynamic. You get a lot of high and low screams. Occasionally you get like some whispers, and like I think there's like some spoken word on here too. Voices of Angels in particular, I thought the whispers were used very effectively. It kind of makes it sound like a little bit more sinister overall. But the thing I really liked about this is it's definitely, you know, got like a lot of progressive flair to it, like really cool transitions, tons and tons of fun riffs. But it's not too self-indulgent. At no point in here did I think it kind of got like lost in the sauce. Like the songs stayed very direct and very on point. Like a lot of like more straightforward songwriting tropes with just like a little bit of like a progressive sort of like flash to them. And all of them brought the heft. All of these songs feature great bone-crunching riffs. Even when they're playing a little bit more towards their melodic side, like songs like Dark Oblivion and I Am the One have like some really good, dreary, melancholic melodies. It still stays just very heavy and very in your face the entire time. Now I will say it does feel a little bit long. There are some points in here that kind of dragged. And for a progressive death metal band, I feel like there's like a lack of solos on here. Not that that's like a deal breaker or anything, but that's like generally like a pretty prominent thing in a lot of like progressive, bands in general. But I will say that the friggin' use of guitar harmonies and like really good harmonized riffs, honestly, it didn't make me miss the solos that much. But yeah, overall, this was really solid. A fuck ton heavier than I was expecting. Like, even this album cover, it feels more like, a progressive metal album. You don't expect, like, death metal roars and such when you look at this. But it's absolutely chock full of it. Like, this is legit heavier than hell. So once again, thank you, Scott, for sending me this. And I'm gonna check out your first album as well, just because, well, I like this one and I want to hear more by you guys. But yeah, if you're a big fan of, oh man, dude, like this is the tricky part because this is kind of like all over the place. I mean, there's like hints of Memoriam, I guess, but I would say like, I don't know, there's definitely like some At the Gates kind of stuff on here. Again, like Mutagenic Host, especially in the heavier, groovier parts, which that's a good chunk of this. And in terms of like a flat out like progressive death metal band that I can compare this to, I mean, there's like a little bit on here that kind of reminded me of like Rivers of Nile or something like that, but I don't know. This is kind of hard to describe, but definitely worth checking out. So yeah, do that. And finally, we have Gates to Hell, Death Comes to All. This is the second album from this Kentucky-based death metal / metallic hardcore act. I actually saw these guys with Frozen Soul, Creeping Death, and Enforced, I believe, last year. Put on a fucking just nasty live show. I have their first album, which I thought was really good and really short. And I'm probably going to end up saying the same thing about this one because it's also really good and really short. I want to say, I don't think this even clocks like the half-hour mark. Now, this band jumped up to the big leagues from Maggot Stomp Records all the way to Nuclear Blast, and I would say they did a pretty good job with their major label debut. All right, major label as far as like, metal goes, I guess. Pretty much this is just kind of everything that they did on the first album, except way more refined. You got tons of hefty, syncopated, just gnarly grooves. You get the double time beat downs. Not a lot of blast beats, but honestly, it really doesn't need it to be heavier than hell. This is more like groove laden. Like a lot of like, different kinds of like breakdown styles. You get the classic like single kick, more hardcore kind of breakdowns where it's just kind of chugging over that single kick drum, the more syncopated stutter kick stuff you'd hear in more modern metalcore, and flat out just gnarly slams. And all that is just scattered throughout this entire album, which, I don't know, it's kind of comparable to bands like Sanguisugabog and 200 Stab Wounds, namely 200 Stab Wounds, because this band likes to transition a lot. Like, each one of these songs, regardless of how short they are very riff change happy. Like, they like to just switch up, go from a hardcore chuggathon to like some flat out more like just death metal riffing, like a song like Weeping in Pain. There's some transitions in there that they just kind of go from, death metal tremolos and shit to just like big syncopated gut stomping grooves. That was definitely something that was on the first album, and I think they just kind of do it a little bit better here. That, and it's not all like so sharp and jagged. Occasionally there's some like transitional atmosphere to kind of break it up a little bit, because you're gonna want this thing to be broken up a little bit, because all of this is just out to fucking throttle you. This is just one of those cases where they took the foundation that they had and just refined it down to something that is 100% gonna inspire a windmill kick or two to the face, which, if I'm being completely honest, it probably already has. Hell, it probably happened at the show we saw. We just missed it. They just hauled the body off in the dark and picked up his fucking teeth and wished him the best of luck. I suppose the only thing I could probably knock it on is, the same thing that I probably knocked the first one on is it is really damn short. But I certainly can't say that it drags at any point. It shouldn't. If you have it whittled down that much, it shouldn't, and it doesn't, and clearly it doesn't overstay its welcome. But yeah, if you're a big fan of Sanguisugabog, Gate Creeper, 200 Stab Wounds, shit like that, check this out. It's vicious, it's short, again, but you know what? You can just fucking start it right back over after you're done if you want, 40 minutes worth of music like most albums. But yeah, check it out. Good stuff. And that we'll do it for this collection update. And I'm already working on the next one. I'm going to try to stay a little bit focused on collection updates here for a little bit in terms of solo stuff. I got a lot I want to catch up to, and I feel like if I get caught up to a certain point, I can start working on some other stuff because I have some other segments that I haven't done in a while that I definitely want to do. But a lot of these collection updates will feature some new releases that I 100% want to go over because there's been a ton of good music that we just haven't had time to cover that I'm going to try to do my best to cover. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They're only 99 cents, and our Lone Perk is doing a members-only stream, which we will be doing one again at some point, not really sure when, but we just got to kind of like pick a date, you know, now that schedules are getting back to normal after MDF. Shouldn't be that much longer. Anyway, memberships are the main way to support the channel now. We also still have our store, thrallsmetal.com, with our hats and shirts. That is linked down below, and there's a join button down there if you'd like to join up and become a Thralling. I still have no idea what we call you guys. But hey, we're glad you're here, and that goes beyond just our members. That goes to every single one of our subscribers. Thank you guys for like literally every bit of support you guys give us. We are looking forward to overloading you with more content. Again, we have like a lot of different things we're kind of working on, some new segment ideas, perpetually trying to keep the gears turning in our depraved minds so we can keep entertaining you with our absolute silliness and occasionally our knowledge of metal. But yeah, you guys absolutely rule. Thank you once again, and we will catch you later.